Hey, how's it going? It's Keith Townsend, principal of the CTO Advisor. If you've been following this Dell VxRail HCI system software series, we appreciate you for joining the series. I have Thom Greene, engineer extraordinaire, on the other line. Tom, how's it going?
Hi, it's going great. How are you doing, Keith?
Doing pretty good. So we're going to talk about this VxRail system software from HCI system software from a higher level than I think what you and Joe and Alistair were going in the next video. I think I want to talk and give background as to why we're even here. You know, we're in the CTO Advisor Hybrid Infrastructure sponsored by Intel. Thank you, Intel, for sponsoring this video series along with Dell Technologies. But in general, you built the CTO Advisor Hybrid Infrastructure from a software layer, correct?
Yeah. So you had the bare hardware, and then I took it from there. I created everything from the vSAN and the vSphere all the way up.
And when we handed over the bare hardware over to you, you kind of came back and said, Keith, this is great hardware. If we were doing a home lab, but we're not doing a home lab, we're actually trying to mimic a production environment. So we had to make some changes. We had to go back and buy different drives. We had to go back and buy different hardware controllers for the storage subsystems, etc., so that vSphere and vSAN wouldn't yell at us and give us alerts. So when we went to go do projects like we did when we compared all of the VMware Cloud solutions, that we could, kind of have some authority in our voice and really get as close to a enterprise deployment as possible. However, we're kind of past that point. We're at that point where we needed to look at upgrading the system. We built the CTO Advisor Hybrid Infrastructure as a representation of a traditional enterprise IT infrastructure that was looking to be on the edge of upgrading. From a practical sense, we're at vSphere 6.7 update 3, and vSphere 7.0 has been out for, I think, over a year now, and it's safe to say it's time to make that migration. However, and this is where time comes into play, I asked you for a quote on making that upgrade or doing that upgrade, and you came back with a number that kind of shocked me, Tom. Can you tell me why the number is so big? Why are you charging me so much?
Well, that number was for the friends and family rate as well. So you're lucky I like it. But no, there's a lot of work that goes into an upgrade. If you think about you're just upgrading a program, like whenever you do an update for your productivity software, your Office or whatever, you just download a file and it installs, and you're done in 10 minutes. But whenever you're doing a data center upgrade like this, it's a massive undertaking, and you have to make sure every piece is compatible with every other piece, or else the upgrade's going to fail. Even if it looks like it succeeds, it's going to fail at some point. You do a live migration, and then the virtual machine black holes itself. That's something that has happened before, and you need to do a lot of research to make sure that that doesn't happen.
And we're, full disclosure, we're using vSAN today. It's been relatively simple to manage. I can go in and do stuff in it. I try not to, but I can if I need. I can provision a new storage pool. I can expand the existing storage inside of it. I'm capable of doing that. It's that simple of a system to manage day to day. But when it comes to upgrade, I had some concerns. Can you walk us through some of the concerns around vSAN and kind of, I call it on Twitter, I've been calling it having naked vSAN.
Yeah. So whenever you're doing these upgrades, there's some very prescriptive mixtures of hardware, firmware, and drives that you need to have inside your system, and so it becomes very hard to coordinate and make sure that you have exactly the right firmware on the drive, firmware on the controller, drivers, everything. It just becomes very, very cumbersome if you're working on a naked vSAN, as you say, or a system that you just built together yourself.
Yeah, from a layperson's perspective, as I'm thinking through the process of upgrading a storage array versus upgrading the compute underlay. When those things are separate, you know what? It's fairly straightforward. I can upgrade my storage underlay independently. I can upgrade my compute underlay independently and make sure those things are from a high level compatible and move forward. But this in this environment, like the VMs are running on the storage platform that, or the VM hypervisor platform is actually the storage platform. So if you break the storage platform, you can't independently fix the hypervisor platform. It's all in one. So this is kind of something that I had not considered. So I have an appreciation for the quote and for the friends and family discount and for the level of effort that it takes to upgrade the system. However, from a practical perspective, I looked at the quote and I'm thinking, man, I could get Thom to deploy VMware Tanzu into my data center and do some really great research and provide value to the audience beyond just going from vSphere 6.7 to vSphere 7.0, which is more or less invisible to my audience. So, from an executive perspective, as a business owner, I struggled with what I saw on paper. I had when I go from vSphere 6.7 to 7.0, I'm going to have to pay that pain point from an engineering perspective in some way. We'll get into VCF and the HCI system software in a second, but from a practical perspective, I wanted to redeploy Thom to do something more creative. This is when our friends over at Dell Technologies reached out to us and said, Keith, have you really looked at VxRail system software, specifically the integration with VCF? And this is where we engage to kind of kick the tires on it. And Thom goes into some pretty good detail on the video with Alistair and Joe after this video. But what caught my interest was this ability to redeploy Thom to do more interesting stuff. Thom, tell us, what does VCF, VMware Cloud Foundation, and VxRail system, HCI system software, what does that get us?
Yeah, so VMware VCF gets you a very cloud-like experience of running the VMware stack in your private data center. So it's very much a kind of turnkey application. You do a little bit of setup at the beginning, you hit a button, and you can expand your data center. The entire deployment is automated to the VMware validated design. So you know that the software is going to work together, it's going to be deployed correctly as long as you have the parameters right. And so that's why you have somebody set up the parameters, you get that going. However, if you're not using a subsystem like a VxRail, you have to make sure that you're doing the hardware procurement and the hardware vetting yourself. So whenever you're using that VMware cloud-like deployment experience with VCF on a platform like VxRail, you're getting a joint engineering experience. So you've got a bunch of people at Dell, a bunch of people at VMware who are like me, or who are like your engineers, going and vetting the hardware, the software, the firmware, and drivers all together, which on an average deployment in an enterprise can save 3-4 weeks or maybe even months, depending on how complicated the systems are.
So, from a practical perspective, if we would have bit the bullet, so to speak, and got VCF and VxRail, specifically VxRail, in our 6.7 deployment, because we are using Dell hardware today, if we would have just gotten the configuration with this pre-validated VxRail platform system software, explain to me the level of effort and even the reduction in quote for you to go from percentage-wise, from you to go from 6.7 to 7.0, the request that I made to you.
Well, it frankly becomes just one-click deployment. So you just go in and say, I want to upgrade. It validates, makes sure everything is good for you, and then it does the orchestration itself. So I don't even have to know what order to do things in. VCF talks to the VxRail manager and just orchestrates the hardware and software upgrades for you. So it really doesn't require anything, and as long as you can trust the Dell research and you vet that out yourself, and that's very little time to measure twice before you click that button.
So from a practical perspective, I would have had the value or been able to redeploy you in the value areas that I wanted to. We want to do Tanzu research. We want to look at some of the other container platforms and think about multi-cloud and operating the CTO advisor hybrid infrastructure in a true hybrid manner. And if we would have gotten VxRail system software in the beginning, we would be at a place where we would prefer versus me needing to have you do this validation work. Thom, I really appreciate you taking out the time to talk to me about the high-level value of VMware Cloud Foundation and VxRail's HCI system software and how it would have benefited the CTO advisor going forward. As we reevaluate what we're going to do in our data center, we'll talk through some of the value and, quite frankly, what you're paying up front for that value at the end for the agility, that cloud-like ability. If you want to find out more about this series, you can visit us on the web, thectoadvisor.com/Dell Tech to see this entire series. If you want to learn more about the CTO Advisor, you can follow me on the web at CTO Advisor. On Twitter, thectoadvisor.com is the landing spot for all CTO Advisor content taught to you. Next, CTO Dose.